It's the Feast of Pentecost, and here is the great reading from Acts chapter 2. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place, and suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Now, there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem, and at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered, because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear, each of us, in our own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs, in our own languages. We hear them speaking about God's deeds of power." And all were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine." But Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them. "Men of Judea and all who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen to what I say. Indeed, these are not drunk, as you suppose, for it is only 9 o'clock in the morning." No, what was spoken through the prophet Joel, what he said is this: "In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Even upon my slaves, both men and women, in those days I will pour out my Spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show portents in the heaven above, and signs in the earth below, blood and fire and smoky mist. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the coming of the Lord's great and glorious day. Then everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved." There's something rather lyrical about the Pentecost reading in Acts. All those strange sounding geographical data points are linked linguistically with those unlikely rough and ready unschooled disciples. Somehow Luke paints such an amazing diorama with his words that if we're familiar with this story, we will already have a powerful image of it imprinted in our imaginations. The church loves this story and the way, domino-like, the good news is taken from Jerusalem out into the wider world. We often refer to this event as the birthday of the church. What we might miss is the objection thrown into the mix right at the start. "They're drunk," shout the naysayers. "They're talking nonsense. they're behaving inappropriately, they're clogging up the highway. The take-home point is this: that just as the book The Acts of the Apostles models good practice in the terms of the requirement, indeed the compulsion driven by the Holy Spirit to share the good news of forgiveness and grace with the communities beyond the faithful, so each time that happens, that sharing happens, objections pop up. Objections. In the Acts of the Apostles, these take a variety of forms. There are hecklers from the crowd, there are political shenanigans, there are religious violence, intellectual debate, commercial hostility, to mention but a few. The question today's passage raises is this: are we willing to ride the pushback to get the message of the good news of Jesus across? Now, how we answer that question depends on what we believe about the presence of the Holy Spirit. Forget the tongues of flames, the speaking in foreign languages for a minute. The fundamental question is whether we think God is in the business of breaking into the world and into our lives. If we do believe that, then along with a deep awareness of His Holy Spirit's presence comes courage to face up to objections and objectors. So, sisters and brothers, here's the question: do you believe that God is breaking into your life?